California Democrats are pushing back against efforts to recall Governor Gavin Newsom. It comes as a petition seeking to remove the governor appears to be picking up steam. On Tuesday, the state's Democratic Party held its first press conference to formally address what they're calling the California coup.
We are here today because we recognize that this effort will undermine those efforts. And so let us focus on what is necessary to defeat COVID-19, to get Californians back to work, to get our children back to school, and to focus on the many multiple challenges that are facing our state. The recall does not assist that. And those who are promulgating it, those who are advancing it, are doing it with the same motivations that we saw this past weekend: to overturn a democratic election, to undermine the votes of millions of people, to sow discord, distrust, and disunity at a time when we need to come together as a state.
Governor Newsom is facing increased scrutiny over his handling of the state's worsening coronavirus crisis, with a 13.7% positivity rate. The state is seeing an average of more than 40,000 new cases per day. For more on this, let's bring in reporter for the Sacramento Bee, Sophia Bollag. She covers California politics and the Newsom administration. Thank you so much for being with us. It's interesting. The last time that we had you on, we talked a little about the effort to recall Governor Newsom. What has happened since then, and what can you tell us about the potential connection, to the attack on the U.S. Capitol?
Yeah, so things are still moving forward with the recall effort. At this point, the recall supporters are still trying to qualify the recall effort for the ballot. They're still collecting signatures up and down the state, and trying to convince more Californians that Newsom should be removed from office. In terms of any connections to the insurrection at the Capitol last week, at the U.S. Capitol rather, Democrats have earlier today, as you alluded to in that clip, they held a press conference where they tried to draw a connection there. But when reporters asked, what evidence that they had that there was some sort of connection between the people who were rioting at the U.S. Capitol and the people who are running this recall effort, they didn't provide any evidence. And so it's not clear if they have any at this point. And it's just not clear that there's a real connection there. But certainly Democrats are trying to draw at least, in principle, a connection between this effort to oust the governor and, supporters of President Donald Trump and, more conservative movements in this country. They're trying to draw a parallel there, and it's unclear at this point how much evidence they have.
Well, Sophia, let's talk about the coronavirus pandemic. California has been hammered, hitting 30,000 deaths on Monday. How is the governor responding?
Yeah, so Newsom has been pretty focused on the state's vaccination efforts. He said that vaccinations aren't happening quickly enough in the state, and so he's been taking some steps to try to speed that up. He actually set his own sort of self-imposed goal. I believe it was on Thursday. In 10 days, he wants to vaccinate 1 million Californians. So that self-imposed goal will be up, I believe, at the end of this weekend. So we'll see if he meets that goal. But in the meantime, he's been opening some sports stadiums up to become vaccination sites. He's loosened some of the rules around vaccinations and basically the priority order. California has a list of priority populations for who should get the vaccine first, starting with medical workers, then going on to people who live in nursing homes, moving on to essential workers, older Californians, people who are over 75, over 65. There's sort of a priority tiering system that the state set up, and Newsom actually loosened some of those requirements around the priorities and basically gave counties and local distribution sites a little bit more flexibility to basically, if they run out of people in those higher tiered priority groups, that they can start moving on to lower priority people, with the goal being that, if people in some of those higher tiers refuse the vaccine, or if there's some reason that the state can't get them vaccinated as quickly as they need to before those doses expire, they just want to make sure they're not wasting any doses of vaccine. So they've loosened up those priority requirements a little bit to try to get as many people vaccinated as possible.
Sophia, what about the financial picture? This year, California could end up actually giving money back to taxpayers after discovering a $15 billion budget windfall. Where is that surplus coming from?
Yeah, that was some somewhat surprising news. Certainly, it's surprising compared to what we were expecting at the beginning of the pandemic. If you had told me back in the spring that California was going to expect a $15 billion surplus this upcoming budget year, I don't think I would have believed you. Basically, at the start of the pandemic, budget analysts predicted that there would be a much more basically widespread economic impact, economic downturn in terms of the California economy, and that therefore California would just have far less revenue to work with in its budget. But what we actually have seen is, as the pandemic has progressed, it has really disproportionately hurt low-income people who are already struggling. And higher income earners have actually gone through this pandemic. Many businesses that were already doing well continue to do well. Higher income individuals have been able to keep their jobs and transition to working from home. And so a huge part of the state's tax base, which really determines how much money California has to work with as it's crafting its budget, that tax revenue did not dip the way that analysts thought it would. And so therefore, there is this sort of unexpected $15 billion that Newsom and lawmakers have to work with as they're crafting the next budget.
Boy, it's just not something that you would ever expect, as you said. All right, Sophia Bollag with the Sacramento Bee. Sophia, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.